After watching Alcaraz and Sinner push each other to the limit in the Beijing final last week, it gave me a whole new perspective on their rivalry going forward. Now, many of you guys have been talking about the possibility of a new Big Two, which makes sense seeing that both players shared the 4 slams this year among themselves. But taking a look at what went down in the final, the dynamics of the Sinner-Alcaraz rivalry, and the depth of the rest of the field, what conclusions can we make about the new Big Two? After Alcaraz's disappointing US Open campaign, many of us wondered how he was going to respond to the situation this time, seeing that he also found himself in a similar situation last year when he also had a poor second half of the season. This time though, Alcaraz flipped the switch. He got back to his winning ways with some decent wins at the Davis Cup last month, before turning on the heat at the Laver Cup with emphatic wins against Ben Shelton and Fritz. It almost seemed like Alcaraz became more mentally refreshed and was playing freely without any pressure. Getting in those reps seemed to be the perfect preparation for Beijing in the remainder of the year because Alcaraz looked like a man on a mission at the China Open. Facing lots of firepower from Perricard in the first round, Alcaraz didn't get many opportunities to break against the Frenchman, who was serving lights out. However, it looked like Perricard had lapses in concentration and played loose opening games in each set, which ultimately proved too costly. He made 3 double faults in the first game of the second set, and Alcaraz accepted the gift and was 2 for 2 on breakpoint conversions. I personally thought Alcaraz did a great job putting restraint on his forehand and not going too big when he didn't need to. Overall, it led to fewer errors. Perricard, on his part, could have done better as he only managed to win 4 of 22 points on Alcaraz's second serves. But by the time Alcaraz faced Griekspoor in the second round, it was a complete demolition to say the least. I mean, Alcaraz took less than an hour to get rid of a top 30 player. He didn't lose a single point on his first serve, let alone face any breakpoints himself as he blitzed through the match 6-1, 6-2 your final. The take-home for me was seeing Alcaraz play with much more intent than I'd seen in the last couple weeks. It was almost like he was trying to prove to everyone that he could win titles easily on fast hard courts and put an end to the Nadal stereotyping and comparisons. With the win, Alcaraz joined Sinner and Felix Auger-Aliassime as the 3rd player born in the 2000s to reach 200 tour-level wins. After going God mode on Griekspoor, Alcaraz then faced Khachanov in the quarterfinal, and this one was competitive in the first set. I noticed Alcaraz going berserk on the backhand cross-court exchanges, hitting harder and flatter, and I remember saying to myself that if Alcaraz's backhand becomes more of a weapon than it already is, no one is going to stand a chance. Carlitos, as usual, had a lot of disguise on his drop shot and used it to great effect, doing so a total of 10 times throughout the match. A straight sets win in the end for Carlitos. However, Medvedev was waiting for him in the semis. But as much as you can never count Medvedev out, I just didn't know how he could get past this version of Alcaraz, especially knowing that Medvedev's serve still isn't at the 2021 or 2022 level for him. For starters, Alcaraz served better than Medi during the match. His average speed was faster, and the percentages on points won behind the serves were a lot better. The first set was close, and both players exchanged breaks a couple of times, but Alcaraz was just too good as he took the first set. Medvedev then had some physical struggles midway through the second, and Carlos was able to seal the deal in straights. Apart from his serve, Medvedev played great, but Carlos was just too good. If we're being realistic, it's hard to say what Medvedev could have done better in order to prevent Carlitos from reaching the final in Beijing. After the match, Medvedev told Carlos he was going to paint his hair blonde and put the name Borek on himself to help him. Classic Medvedev with a plan. But on a more serious note, let me draw your attention to what Medvedev said about Carlos after the match. Here, take a listen.
Yeah, I played pretty well, but I don't see how I could beat him today, on a given day today.
Seeing Medvedev consistently getting owned by Alcaraz and Sinner, even on hard courts, and a sort of acceptance that he couldn't have done much better, just tells you how much these two are separating themselves from the rest of the pack. Speaking of the defending champion Sinner, his path to the final wasn't as straightforward as Alcaraz's. Sinner lost the opening sets against Jarry and Safiullin, and then needed a second set tiebreak to come through against Lehechka and Bu. Looking at the Jarry match, it was Sinner's first match since the US Open, so the Italian wasn't as sharp as he usually is. He struggled to read Jarry's big first serves and seemed to be taken aback by the quality from Jarry. He then had to adjust his position on the return, staying deeper, and that helped him get more balls back in play. We saw how this changed the dynamics of the match after the first serve. Having now found his rhythm, the Italian cranked up his ball-striking wizardry and seized control of the match to pull through in 3. By the time Sinner was facing Safiullin in the second round, the controversy around his doping saga had resurfaced, with WADA appealing the decision to let Sinner off the hook. I'm going to come back to the WADA case because there's an important point I need to make. Like in the previous round, Sinner had lost the first set against Safiullin and was spraying errors uncharacteristically from his forehand. But if there's one thing you can count on in a Sinner match, it's his ability to rise to the occasion. Sinner finally broke Safiullin in the 6th game of the second set and managed to level the match. By the third set, Safiullin was the one literally making all the errors, with Sinner coming through despite not playing his best tennis. Still mourning his aunt's death and fresh off the WADA allegations, I wondered just how much it was going to affect the Italian this time. However, as we all know, Sinner has ice in his veins, and this showed in his quarterfinal match against Lehečka. The Italian breezed through the first set in just over 30 minutes, but Lehečka wasn't about to be a spectator in his own match, so he mixed things up a bit in the second set. But because he couldn't trouble Sinner with his serve, it was always going to be a tall order. The set went into a tiebreak, and Lehečka did hold 2 set points, but then just imploded with a number of errors to give Sinner the W. The reward for Sinner was a semi-final clash with the biggest surprise package of the tournament. Chinese wildcard Yan Chaokete Bu had just eliminated 2 seeds, Musetti and Rublev, en route to the semis. As you would expect, there was no shortage of drama. Both players smacked the balls in long, brutal rallies that would have produced a lot of winners against many other players, but Sinner's ball retrieval ability tells you just how much strength he now has in his legs. I've seen some comparisons between Sinner and a younger Novak when it comes to movement, and it's mostly due to Sinner's ability to slide in and out of corners and hit balls with so much power at the end of his range. Bu did his best, bringing a lot of firepower in the baseline rallies and also cooking up a number of volleys and drop shots to trouble Sinner. But in the end, it wasn't enough. The 10th meeting in the Sinner-Alcaraz rivalry was now confirmed, with Sinner coming through in straights. Before we talk about what went down in the final, let me quickly throw in a word about SuckerPunch, our sponsor. SuckerPunch has been helping us create a lot more of the content that you know and love on the channel, and let me tell you, I've been using their products too. I especially like the hydration shooters that have been helping me recover when I'm on court, and also after to make sure I'm not too dehydrated. If you're interested in giving the products a try, click the link in our description for 25% off your order, and be sure to let me know how they work for you. Anyways, back to the video. With both players taking slightly different paths to the final, the spotlight was all set for a superhero showdown, and let me tell you, it delivered. This was their performance rating from Tennis Insights going into the final. Alcaraz had the quicker start and raced out to a 4-1 lead, but Sinner got back on serve as Carlitos tried to serve out the set. Sinner then saved a couple of break points and eventually took the set in a tiebreak, and I thought this was going to be an uphill battle for Carlitos. But then I remembered that Carlos also lost the first set in both of the matches they played earlier this year, and still ended up beating Sinner. The second set picked up from the wild swings in momentum from the first set, and for me, the all-important game was the 8th game, when Alcaraz was trying to level the score at 4-all. He was able to withstand a lot of pressure from Sinner in that game, and eventually went on to break Sinner in the next one before serving out the set. I thought Alcaraz did a brilliant job recovering from the disappointment of the first set, which he totally should have won, by the way. Anyways, we went to a third set, and this one was tighter than the strings on a new racket, with both players showing us why they're the best in the world. Almost every rally was highlight-worthy. Alcaraz got the early break again, peppering Sinner's backhand this time. But a loose service game with a couple of forehand errors at 4-3 saw Sinner break back. The set carried over to a tiebreak, and Alcaraz won 7 points in a row from love 3 down to win the title. It's even more impressive to know that he did it against a player that had won 18 of his previous 19 tiebreaks. One of the most important dynamics from the match was seeing a similar pattern from both players on the approach shots. Most of the time they hit their approach shots with a lot of power and spin, so that the other player had no chance at extending the point. Another thing Alcaraz tried to do more often was venturing forward the moment he had the chance to while returning Sinner's serve. And I should also mention that Alcaraz's forehand was also a major differentiator during the final. I thought he did more damage with it than Sinner did on his forehand, especially on the big points. But at the end of the day, we saw just how different their styles of play could be at times. Sinner is obviously the more steady and solid from the baseline. He's the guy who can maintain an 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 consistency all match, but Alcaraz, he can go from 6 out of 10 to a 12 out of 10 quality in a split second. Here's how Sinner describes their contrasting styles.
You know, he is the one who brings the firepower, the hot shots, he involves the crowd. He's a bit different. I am more like the solid player, quite calm, so it's like fire and ice a bit.
Honestly, I don't know if telling Alcaraz to focus 100% on playing higher percentage tennis all the time like Sinner is the best thing, really. I mean, it's the obvious thing, right? But then it just takes away from the very thing that makes Alcaraz Alcaraz. When he needs to, Alcaraz can play more with percentages and make his game less entertaining. I just feel like he really doesn't need to do that all the time. Maybe I'm saying this because he won, because who makes 59 unforced errors and still ends up winning a match? For Sinner, his net game still needs some improvement. He was only 50% effective at the net, which is never going to be good enough against Alcaraz. Although Sinner's first serve gave him a couple of easy +1 forehands against Alcaraz, there's also still room for improvement because he still doesn't get the most dividends from it against Carlitos. It's just because Carlos is an elite returner. But let's talk about the gripping rivalry here, guys, and what to expect from the new Big Two. The final in Beijing lasted 3 hours and 21 minutes, making it the longest match in Beijing tournament history, and the fans were the real winners. Carlos Alcaraz versus Jannik Sinner has rapidly blossomed into one of the most exciting rivalries in recent history, even though it was just the second time they were facing off in a championship match. Sinner might not have shown us his best level in Beijing, but if you asked me, I think peak Alcaraz beats Sinner at least 7 out of 10 times. Debatable, isn't it? If you disagree, let me know your reasons why. Conversely, average Sinner is better than average Alcaraz, so it all depends on the version of both players that show up when they clash. Alcaraz is now 3-0 against Sinner this year, and it's obviously a problem for the Italian because Sinner is 58-3 against other players not named Alcaraz, only losing to Tsitsipas in Monte Carlo, Medvedev at the All England Club, and Rublev in Montreal. Alcaraz now leads the head-to-head 6-4, and looking at all 10 matches they've played, 9 out of 10 of those matches have either gone the distance or needed a tiebreak in one of the sets. It's never a blowout for one or the other. I've been particularly impressed with how well Sinner now holds up against Alcaraz physically. It just tells you how far he's come from a physical standpoint. Alcaraz's coach Ferrero was quite emotional after the match, and Carlos explained that it might have been because of everything they've gone through in the last 2 months. Alcaraz explained that he was really down after the American swing and didn't even want to travel, but managed to get motivated by his team. Alcaraz is only the second Spaniard to win the China Open, with the first, of course, being Rafa. We also saw that Carlitos is now the first player to win an ATP 500 title on all surfaces, a strange stat. But let's talk about the new sheriffs in town. Mats Wilander has a steaming hot take. He thinks these guys are so good that not even the big three could touch them. I think that's a bit of a stretch though, but I do agree that the Sinner-Alcaraz rivalry is definitely one of the most interesting rivalries we've seen in a while. And I think they're going to set the tone for how our sport is played for years to come. Both players won all the Grand Slams this year and have won a combined 10 titles this year, 4 for Alcaraz and 6 for Sinner. Both players are taking the sport to a whole new level. When it comes to the year-end #1 finish, about 2,800 points still separate Alcaraz from Sinner, and except if we see a dramatic turn of events, Sinner is very likely to end the year as #1. Sinner has also been a little more consistent throughout the year too. But with WADA still seeking some punitive measures for Sinner, the Italian isn't out of the woods just yet. The Sinner camp was surprised at WADA's decision to appeal to the Court of Arbitration for Sport for a 1 to 2 year ban. Sinner's lawyer said that the decision was reasonable but unnecessary. Now, opinions are split again, just like when the news first broke. Some fans have questioned WADA's credibility, and this might be one of the very first times they've appealed the ruling of an independent international disciplinary court, while a few others are still convinced Sinner was treated differently regardless of the Bortolotti case. Well, WADA has the right to do what it's going to do, and the argument from them is that the finding of no fault or negligence was not correct under the applicable rules. The word on the street is that the appeal brief must be submitted by October 10th, and the CIS will then define the judging panel and decide the hearing date. So we'll know better and have more clarity in the coming weeks. Meanwhile, a couple of players have voiced their opinions about the situation. Here's a snippet of what Novak said.
It's quite obvious that we have a system that is not working well. There's way too many inconsistencies, way too many, governing bodies involved, and just this whole case is not helping our sport at all.
I imagine how difficult the situation is for Sinner, and having to play with the weight of the news on his shoulders can't be easy. The whole saga might take a couple of months, and for now is the biggest threat to seeing more epic matches from Sinner and Alcaraz. I'd say let's revisit the conversation when there's been some progress with the proceedings. But over to you guys. What did you think about the final in Beijing, the dynamics of the Sinner-Alcaraz rivalry, and the predictions for a new Big Two going forward? Be sure to let me know in the comments. And if you haven't already, be sure to check out our Discord channel where we chat all things tennis, and check out our newsletter, the Courtside Digest, for the latest news and opinions from around the tennis tours. Until next time, keep going for the lines.